Good evening, everyone. This video will be covering one urban legend from every US state. I worked hard to find some obscure or at least interesting stories. It was a lot of fun to dig into the legends of the states, and some areas were far harder to research than others. Overall, the West Coast and Midwest had a lot of cool, relatively unknown legends. I originally released these as shorts, so it was a fun challenge to try to condense the topics into that format. I probably won't be doing it that way again. I hope you enjoy the video. If you do, please leave a like. Alright, let's begin. This Alabama urban legend's exact location is said to be alongside a road connecting First Avenue and Huffman in the city of Birmingham. It's placed near the Mount Zion Cemetery in many stories. The story is simple. A construction worker who was on LSD took his building materials, drove into the area, and built a brick wall while he was still under the influence. The result was a warped structure made out of loops and deep spirals. Its creator was never found, and the structure soon collapsed. The Alaska Triangle stretches down to Anchorage, east to Juneau, and then north towards Barrow. Over 20,000 people have disappeared in the region in the last 50 or so years. It's home to a vile vortex, a hypothesized set of zones on the world map that naturally attract electromagnetic strangeness, like the Devil's Sea in the Pacific or the Bermuda Triangle. Travelers in this area say confusion, nightmares, hallucinations, and equipment malfunctions are common. Native legends say that this zone is inhabited by many cryptids, like the Kushtaka and Qualu-Pollock. The Commons, Massachusetts, was settled in 1693. It's an area full of massive boulders that were deposited by glaciers during the Ice Age. The town went into a decline in the 19th century as its residents moved closer to the sea, and was abandoned in 1830. Left behind dogs briefly flourished in the area, leading to the town's nickname, Dogtown. According to legend, squatters moved into Dogtown and began to practice witchcraft. They too left, and the area rejoined the wilderness. Roger Babson, a philanthropist, entered the area during the Great Depression and hired stonecutters to carve inspirational messages like, "If work stops, values decay," "Industry," and "Get a job" onto the boulders. A large, predatory creature was taking out livestock and pets in Glastonbury, Connecticut in 1939. Eyewitnesses reported the animal to be a massive wild cat, but the description of it soon became warped by state residents. It began to be described as an amalgamation of a dog, bear, and cat, and locals began to go out on trips to hunt the newly named Glawackus. The creature escaped all attempts to catalog it, and would disappear for several years. It reappeared briefly in the 1950s to cause more terror, and then disappeared from Connecticut history. The carnivorous pink cloud is one of the oldest US urban legends I've covered so far, being first recorded in 1605. It all began hundreds of years in the past when a native chief named Tomki took water from the Fountain of Youth somewhere in present-day Timucuan National Preserve, near Jacksonville, Florida. The surrounding tribes attacked him, trying to prevent him from drinking the water. He was struck down by an archer and, for his hubris, was cursed to wander the area, consuming anything he could find. Tomki became Timucuan's carnivorous pink cloud, an organism that drifts across the ground to surround and then digest its prey. The MARTA system is a distinctive part of Atlanta's history. This transit system has over 48 miles of railway and 38 stations. Considering its nature and its more than 50-year-long operations history, it's no surprise that the place has its own ghost. A man in a dark suit with a distinctive black pompadour can be seen sitting on some trains during the final hours before the weekday closing time of 1:30 a.m. He'll show up when only one other person is on board. Observers say that the figure constantly shifts to be in the corner of their eye. He'll eventually tire of this activity and will disappear. It was said that the Waialae Drive-In Theater in Hawaii was built over an ancient grave. It was 1965 when a young woman ran screaming out of the restroom, a faceless entity with no legs dragging itself after her. Her boyfriend saw this whole event and ran outside after her. Young theatergoers continued to record encounters with the being, and the drive-in became a popular destination for most of the 60s. Many showed up just for the opportunity to see the creature. The Swift Peter is a cryptid tied to the DeSoto County area of Mississippi. This creature preyed on household pets in the winter of 1927, leaving behind 7-toed footprints. It took their remains and piled them on a lot in the village of Memphis, near Cooper and Central. Accounts say that the creature targeted families new to the area, making it very likely that the stories were an attempt to discourage people from out of state from settling in the area. Maine is home to the Specter moose, a 10 to 15 foot tall, depending on the account, dirty white moose with massive antlers. The coat of the animal was said to glow faintly. It also had well-developed senses of smell and hearing, could disappear at will, and phase through solid objects. It was first sighted by a hunter named M.A. Cushing in 1901 near Cherriback Mountain. It was witnessed by other hunters over the intervening months near Mount Katahdin. Similar groups of encounters were reported over the course of a handful of months in 1917, 1932, and finally in 1938. The impression I've gotten from the stories is that it does not harm hunters but likes to mess with them. Vale Inn Cemetery in New Hampshire hosts several urban legends. I'll be covering one of them tonight. Fiona Broom was a paranormal investigator who was interested in Vale Road Cemetery. Her photographer had gone to the site in 1999 and passed away shortly after recording paranormal events in the area. Broom went in 2000 with some other colleagues. They went towards the Blue Lady's grave, a gravestone that had a lot of dark history behind it. Fiona saw a roughly 3-foot-tall hairy red creature near the site. She described it as looking like a Muppet. She, for some reason, tried to go closer to it, but an invisible force stopped her. Dozens of other red Muppets appeared, and she and her friends ran for the car. The Gray Man of Pawleys Island, South Carolina, is said to have passed away in 1822 when he sank into the nearby marsh. Local legends say that the Gray Man's spirit still stalks Pawleys Island, appearing to individuals to warn them of horrible incoming storms and hurricanes. The Knoxville urban legend centers around a local townsperson who was active in the late 1990s. He would contact freshmen going to the University of Tennessee and invite them to group caving expeditions throughout Fentress County. He picked inexperienced spelunkers and would take them to caves like Xanadu and Wolf River. The local would often take them to particularly claustrophobic areas and then play multiple pranks, giving many individuals a great fear of the underground by the time they emerged back into daylight. An account from excavation teams in Rockingham, Vermont, claims that a giant was uncovered in 1907. The skeleton's jaw was huge and featured 2 rows of teeth on the top and bottom. It was said that it was the remains of a giant Native American chieftain who was taken out by the settler John Kilburn in 1755. Stories say that the bones were either sent to the Smithsonian or kept in an attic in a small building near Rockingham's Town Square for many years. Either way, the bones went completely missing after their discovery in 1907. West Virginia's Tailypo is a creature with matted black fur, red eyes, and a short, hairless tail. The story goes like this. Old Man Fletcher was a hermit who lived alone deep within the hills of West Virginia. His only company was his 3 hunting dogs. It was late winter, and Fletcher was tired of eating the dried beans he had stockpiled. He dreamed of taking out a deer or other creature for his meal. A black paw emerged through a hole underneath his dining room. The thing that followed was sleek and very large. He took an axe and tried to take it out, but the creature dove back into the hole, leaving Fletcher with the tail. He took it and began to cook it. Then he heard a call underneath the floor. "Tailypo! Where is my Tailypo?" That was the last time Fletcher was seen alive. The abandoned All-American Inn in Glen Rock, Wyoming, is a pretty creepy place. One person on the internet entered the location in late 2023 and took some great photos of stuff left behind by either some prankster or someone trying to discourage people from breaking in. There's more story behind the hotel. It's said that in late 1988, 50 Glen Rock residents living in the neighborhoods near the motel were woken up at around 3 a.m. by knocking sounds that reverberated from their home's walls. The legend goes on to say that the people witnessed mist and glowing lights around the motel at the same time. Walworth County, Wisconsin, hides an interesting cryptid. It all began in 2006. While Holly, a Native American, was driving back to his home in La Crosse with his son. A massive shape landed on their windshield, and the fading light illuminated the thing's features. While Holly reported that it had large, bat-like wings, humanoid legs, a swollen abdomen, and long teeth, which he depicted in this sketch. It screamed and then pushed off of the car, shooting into the night sky. While Holly and his son became violently ill, and they pulled over to throw up. This illness continued to plague them for almost a week. This started the local legend of the Batman of Briggs Road. The Church Hill tunnel collapse of 1925 took out 4 men and trapped a steam engine and 10 flat cars beneath the city of Richmond, Virginia. One story surrounding the tragedy has become an urban legend. Workers who were part of the first effort to rescue the train and its crew supposedly saw a monster emerge out of the rubble. It was humanoid and had a smile that revealed jagged teeth. It fled the scene and headed towards Hollywood Cemetery, where it disappeared. A B-24 bomber crashed into Mission Ridge, a place near Wenatchee, Washington. It immediately entered local legend, with the remaining wing of the downed bomber becoming a destination for many tourists in the summer months, and skiers and snowboarders during winter. According to local stories, the remains of only 5 of the 6 crew members were ever found. The missing man was the tail gunner, and he had a piece of a propeller embedded in his chest in the crash, earning him the name Propman. Propman's body wanders the mountains to this day, and is sometimes encountered by ski patrollers, hikers, and Boy Scouts. Emo's grave is a plot within the Salt Lake Cemetery. This crypt holds the interred remains of Moritz, a politician who founded the Salt Lake Brewery in 1891. He passed away, and his ashes were placed in an urn inside this crypt. This place earned the name Emo's Grave sometime later. Who or what Emo is unknown. The monument quickly started a series of urban legends. By the 1960s, teens began to challenge each other to conduct a ritual. It was said that if you lit a candle and walked around the grave backwards 3 times, the visage of the thing called Emo would appear. Bright red eyes will appear within the door to the tomb and stare at whoever did the procedure. Out of context, the Zozobra festival sounds terrifying. A 50-foot tall marionette is set ablaze as a huge crowd of people chant, "Burn." This tradition of the Santa Fe area was first observed in 1924. Schuster, a World War I vet, came up with the idea after he observed a ceremony of the Mexican Yaqui tribe, in which they destroyed an effigy of the biblical traitor, Judas. Schuster came back to Santa Fe with the idea of Zozobra, a creature reborn each year from the sin and anxiety of the townspeople. Zozobra would come down from the mountains to ruin the annual fiesta. In turn, the citizens would summon a fire spirit to challenge Zozobra and defeat him. Zozobra is filled with old love letters, divorce papers, traffic tickets, and other similar items before being set on fire. The event happens on September 1st of each year. 2024 marks the 100th anniversary of the tradition. Rapid City calls itself the City of Presidents, and it has that name for a good reason. The U.S. presidents can be found all throughout the downtown area. An urban legend connected to Rapid City says that there's another bronze figure that inhabits the display. The statue is relatively nondescript and tries to blend in with the lesser-known presidents from the turn of the 19th century like William Harrison. The figure isn't malevolent, but will move when passerby are around. Fingernail's Freddie is a Rhode Island urban legend that went on to directly inspire Freddy Krueger. Freddie was gainfully employed as a groundskeeper near Camp Curana in the northern part of the state. A group of teens set off fireworks near his home as a prank, which caused a fire that burned down Freddie's home, took out his family, and left his face scarred. He hid in the woods and waited for the teens to return. His fingernails continued to grow long and jagged in the interim. The teens came back to the camp to work as counselors, and Freddie took them out, one at a time, over the course of a single night. The grainy images surrounding this story were what drew me to it. The Blinking Crucifix event occurred in 1989 at Holy Trinity Church in Ambridge, Pennsylvania. It was Good Friday, and over 300 people were in attendance for Mass. Jim Sitkovich, an altar boy, looked up to see that the eyes of Christ in the nave, which had been open, were closed. He told his brother, and they told their uncle, who was the priest. Someone brought a ladder, and people went up to get a closer look at Jesus. Witnesses claimed that the eyes were closed. The eyes returned to their normal open position on Easter. The Vatican sent a team to investigate the event, to determine if it was a miracle. They weren't convinced, and the priest would resign later that year. The Blinking Crucifix became an urban legend. The outskirts of Damascus, Oregon, houses a gigantic gate that leads to a private area called the Temple of Oculus Anubis. This place is at the end of a one-lane gravel road, surrounded by dense forest. Little is known about the place, but many who have snuck into the property believe it to be a spot for cult gatherings, with the grounds featuring Neo-Egyptian architecture and huge statues of the god Sekhmet. It's also said that the area has millions of dollars worth of underground tunnels, with one known to run beneath the main house. It's owned by the Neal family, a group of eye doctors best known for being charged with tax fraud around a decade ago. The legend of the Oklahoma Chicken Man was first heard in 1971. It goes as follows. A farmer in El Reno, Oklahoma, went out to his chicken coop one winter morning and found the door ripped out and thrown. Strange handprints with 6 digits were all over the floor and the sides of the chicken coop. All of the chickens were gone. The farmer called a state game ranger he knew, and the ranger was baffled by what he saw. He sent the prints he collected over to the Oklahoma City Zoo. The experts there said the prints appeared to be of a primate-like creature. Ohio's Glasside Cemetery is one of the more macabre entries I've covered, so this is your final warning. There's an interesting bust of a man in Spring Grove Cemetery, a beautiful gravesite complex. The bust has some lifelike glass eyes that have a tendency to appear as if they are following the viewer. The urban legend says that the man buried here wanted his eyes to be placed into the bust on his tombstone so that he could continually watch over his grave. Horace Mann Elementary School, located in Fargo, North Dakota, was once the site of the county fair. This vacant lot was uninhabited for most of the year. A circus company showed up to prepare for the fair in the early 1900s. One of the elephants attached to the circus's operations suffered a heart attack and passed away. Instead of paying to transport the massive body back to their hometown, the circus company broke the body apart and buried it in the lot. They left by cover of night, leaving the town, at least for a little while, none the wiser. Or so the story goes. The Usdi All of western North Carolina doesn't look that intimidating for a cryptid. According to Cherokee legend, the Usdi All, or Little Deer, came from a time in the past where humans hunted animals out of necessity. People began to take the animals out of greed, and the forest dwellers met together to make a plan. The Little Deer, a member of the council, had an idea. He entered the homes of the hunters and whispered in their ears while they slept. He told them that they must ask an animal for permission and then for forgiveness, before and after, respectively, taking them out. He promised that if they disobeyed, he'd follow them home and then strike them with rheumatism, stopping them from hunting again. A young man, dressed in Victorian garb, appeared in Times Square in the summer of 1950. He stared upwards at the surrounding skyscrapers and then crouched and covered his head as if he was expecting them to collapse. A taxi hit him, taking him out. Later that day, a local police captain examined the man's clothing as the body was being studied by the mortuary team. Banknotes dated to 1876 and a personal letter addressed to Rudolph Fentz were in the pockets. The captain looked through records and found that a man with the same name had been missing since 1876. He closed the case and elected to tell no one else about it. This story was later told as a fact in the days of the early internet. The legend, this entire story, was taken from a 1951 short story by Jack Finney called I'm Scared. Shades of Death Road in Warren County, New Jersey, is a real road that is accessible. Multiple legends surround the origin of its name and the things that dwell along its length. One is simply called the Deer Guardian. The ghost of a Native American shaman is said to haunt the road. The shaman was entrusted with guarding this formal tribal land hundreds of years ago. Taking the form of a deer, he surprises drivers traveling late at night and causes them to wreck. Those who survive these encounters say that the deer, once they got closer, was in fact something wearing the skin of a deer. Lake Tahoe is known for multiple accounts of recovered bodies being found in a perfectly preserved state, years after going missing. Legends about Pyramid Lake within the state of Nevada have said that the remains of many who went missing around Lake Tahoe were recovered in Pyramid Lake. The tales go on to say that an undiscovered tunnel network connects the two bodies of water, resulting in this phenomenon. It was 2013, and the National Report, a satirical newspaper, posted an article that became an urban legend within Nebraska. The Asian giant hornet is a very real thing. It has a wingspan that averages around 7 centimeters in length. The National Report claimed that a group of mutated giant hornets had been accidentally released in parts of Nebraska. They were said to have a wingspan of 28 centimeters and venom that was hundreds of times stronger than the typical Asian hornet. This false account was the most recent iteration of a tale that had existed within the state since the 1950s. Nebraska has had stories surrounding giant mutated hornets for a very long time. The Berkeley Pit is a very real place. This former copper mine is now a pit that extends for over half a mile and is 1,780 feet deep. Located next to the town of Butte, the mine operated well into the 1950s, but was eventually abandoned. Groundwater collected in the pit, leading to the minerals in the cave system entering the water and creating a deadly mixture of chemicals that could take someone out if ingested. The story surrounding the lake is that creatures resembling monsters from Cronenberg films constantly arise from the pit's depths, only to be covertly dispatched by specialized government teams. Clade Edwards, a resident of Tuscumbia, Missouri, was greeted by the sight of a UFO in his fields when he stepped outside on the morning of February 14th, 1967. All of the cattle in his field were staring in the same direction. A mushroom-shaped gray-green craft was parked in the meadow. Small creatures were visible exiting the craft, and they scuttled to and fro into his barn. Edwards said they were around 3 feet tall and were wearing suits that were the same color as the UFO. They had limbs but no discernible hands. They had goggles on and respirator-like devices around where their noses and mouths would typically be. Edwards described them as looking like small penguins. They went back into the craft, and the UFO lifted off into the sky. Now, when you think of Minnesota, you probably wouldn't immediately connect the state to a KGB operation. However, an urban legend relating to a leaked USSR document makes for a compelling story. A series of documents that were leaked after the fall of the USSR revealed that KGB agents had hidden weapons in places within Texas and California. These were going to function as distribution centers should the USSR ever want to start an insurrection in the USA. The documents also revealed that 2 weapons stores were hidden inside of the town of Brainerd, Minnesota. The Soviets gave them the code names Aquarium 1 and Aquarium 2. The weapons have never been located, but the code names led some to think that they might be in the town's historic water tower. It was the late 18th century. Thomas Sims, a Continental Army soldier, and his massive blue hound, it was a Mastiff mix, stopped for the night in a tavern in Port Tobacco, Maryland. He drank a lot and began to brag about the gold he was carrying. He left the tavern and was confronted on a country road by a group of masked men who demanded the gold. Sims refused, and he and his dog did not survive the encounter. The ringleader of the group hid the gold and waited for a few weeks to ensure no one had missed Sims. He went back to retrieve the treasure, but was stunned to see the dog. It stood and simply stared at him. The man fell into shock, but managed to escape. He contracted an illness from his hours spent out in the cold, and shortly passed away. Michigan's Blue Hell is an urban legend that says that a tunnel system located beneath the state leads out of our dimension. It's named for the blue hell glitch that can be found in video games, in which a player clips through the map and lands outside of the environment. The location of this tunnel is debated, but many say that it is somewhere within an abandoned part of Detroit. It's said that you can get outside of reality by playing the elevator game, a complicated ritual that can take you to this space outside of reality. However, be warned, it's a one-way trip to Blue Hell. The Devil Man of Algiers was a popular urban legend that gained popularity in Louisiana in 1938. A local woman was dancing with her partner in a West Bank dance hall and was surprised when the man took his hat off to reveal short horns protruding from his forehead. The man was arrested, the charges still remain unknown, and then placed in jail. The deputy who arrested him locked the cell and exited out into the street, only to run into the exact same man. He drew his weapon and fired when the man refused to answer, but the bullets simply bounced off. He picked up the bullets and chucked them at the officer before disappearing. Sightings continued throughout the fall of 1938, and the Devil Man continued to use his powers to skip bar tabs and avoid law enforcement. Four Winds Farm in Kentucky is right near the site of a popular cryptid, a goat-human hybrid called the Pope Lick Monster. We're not here to talk about the monster today. Instead, I'm going to cover the farm. America in the 1980s was in the midst of the so-called Satanic Panic, and the farm quickly spawned some urban legends. The site had a massive black and red fence and a large snowplow near the front door, on which was painted, "Trespassers will be persecuted." Dogs went missing in this area in the 80s, and drumming and chanting could be heard in the woods some nights. This started a rumor that a goatman-worshipping cult used the farm as a base of operations for their services. Kansas doesn't have a lot of urban legends, but one of the more compelling stories involves the Bel Air Water Tower, which is in Wichita. A young townsperson snuck onto the tower while it was being constructed. It was night, and the man dropped the flashlight he had brought with him off of the structure while he was still on its top. He tried to find his way back to the ladder, but misstepped and fell off. His remains were placed beneath the water tower by the construction company, as they tried to brush the incident off to maintain their public image. It's said that passerby can still hear tapping coming from the base of the tower. The Van Meter visitor was first sighted in September 1903 by Griffith, a local doctor. He was woken up late at night by a light shining into his bedroom. He grabbed his shotgun and went outside to investigate. He saw a large insectile creature perched on a nearby telephone pole with a beam of light shining from its head. He fired, but it seemed unaffected and flew away. The sightings continued over the course of the next 2 nights, and other prominent community members ran into the creature. The townspeople got together and decided to track the creature on October 2nd. They caught sight of it and followed closely behind. It went out to an abandoned coal mine on the outskirts of town and met up with another insect creature. The crowd drove them inside the mine with gunfire and then sealed the entrance. The Elizaville Monster is a cryptid with a far more intriguing alternate nickname: tall, dark, and gruesome. It's located in Boone County, Indiana, and is said to be the cause of several disappearances in Elizaville in the past century. The creature is over 7 feet tall, has glowing red eyes, and is a known carnivore. It prowls the open fields and cemeteries of the area in the early morning, and will hunt those who decide to stop on rural roads from 1 to 3 a.m. Calvary Cemetery, which is in Evanston, Illinois, is said to have an unusual nightly visitor. Seaweed Charlie is a ghost with an intriguing appearance. Witnesses say that he's around 5'11" and is dressed in a ragged Korean War-era naval pilot uniform. His head is enveloped in strands of seaweed, and his eyes shine with yellow light. He rises from the waters of nearby Lake Michigan, and then climbs up the rocks onto the lakeside road. He crosses and then heads towards the cemetery gates, disappearing after passing through them. Charlie is thought to be the ghost of Lieutenant Laverne Neighbors, a Navy flight instructor who went missing after his jet crashed into the lake in 1951. The Waloopsie is a creature that lives in the northwestern states of the lower 48 and parts of North Idaho. This legend has been circulated among lumberjacks. These creatures hunt for food on the tops of trees and inch their way up the trunk, like inchworms. Their tails are spiked, allowing them to hang on branches while asleep. A story goes that a lumberjack took out one of these creatures, which are about the size of a dachshund, and made its hide into a pair of mittens. He tanned the hide and made some beautiful mittens, which he used when he went to work in the cold winter months. The first day, he grasped hold of his axe, but was surprised when the mittens worked their way off of his hand and down the haft. He left them behind, and they were last seen inching into the deep woods. The so-called Colt House in Delaware is a pretty creepy sight, according to urban legends. The woods surrounding the home, which is said to be on Cosart Road, were used in the filming of the 2004 movie, The Village. The exact location of the place varies from story to story. It was first owned and operated by the wealthy DuPont family, which were well known for their habit of intermarrying. It's said to have been the site of satanic and, Special K meetings over the past few decades. Animal and human remains also turn up in the area. These holes can be seen on Highway 24, leaving Manitou, Colorado. They once allowed trains to pass through the mountains. There are 5 small tunnels along the route of the old Colorado Midland Railway. This region was rumored to be a hotbed of cult activity in the midst of the satanic panic of the 1980s and 90s. Local legends state that these groups made their sacrifices, which were taken from local pet shops, in these tunnels. The ruins, an abandoned gold ore processing plant that was bulldozed years ago, was another place in the region that was closely related to the activities in the railway tunnels and had confirmed cult activity. The Dark Watchers are figures that can be reportedly seen in the evening near the Santa Lucia Mountains in California. Native Americans and Spanish explorers reported encounters with them in the late 1600s. These beings are between 7 and 15 feet tall and dress in wide-brimmed hats and long cloaks and carry a stave. They follow travelers and silently watch them from the mountaintops, then disappear if anyone tries to draw close to them. The Dark Watchers are well known in the region, with the famous author John Steinbeck actually mentioning them in a part of his short story, Flight. The Gowrow was first reported in the Arkansas Gazette in 1897. The Gowrow was a creature that had been taking out livestock and pets in the Calf Creek Township area in Searcy County. Its name came from the noises it would make late at night. A businessman from Little Rock named Miller put a posse together and tracked it down to a cave, or so the story goes. They found the entrance full of the skeletons of various animals and ancient human remains. They heard a rumble, and the cave shook as something slithered towards the group. The JATO rocket car story, which is set in Arizona, goes as follows. Someone put a JATO, which stands for Jet Assisted Takeoff, rocket engine onto the back of a car, which is said to have been an old Mustang or Camaro, depending on the story. He went to a desolate stretch of open road, deep in the desert, and started the multiple JATOs attached to his car. The car hit around 350 miles an hour, and the driver lost control. It hit a sharp curve, and the car accelerated, gaining air and plowing into a mountainside. This entire debacle was seen by nearby highway patrolmen, and forensics crews found bone fragments within the wreckage. Alright, that's it for tonight. Thank you so much for watching. I really enjoyed the process of making this series, and hopefully you enjoyed it as well. If you want to support the channel further, consider subscribing or check out the links in the description. I'll see you in the next video. If you've made it this far, I'm going to give a quick channel update. I'm currently in the process of enlisting in the US military. This will affect the upload schedule. I intend to continue to work on scripts and record videos to post on this channel in the future as often as I can. It's going to be a dramatic change, but I still want to keep releasing stuff for y'all. Thank you for your support. I'll see you around. Take care, and good night.